The Emerald Nightmare is always something that has been shrouded in sort of a mystery, but in Legion, we will get a taste of the nightmare and the horror that it has to offer us. And so that's why in today's video, I decided to make a top 10 about the Emerald Nightmare, so that when you guys experience it in Legion, you will sort of know what to expect. In today's video, we will be talking about 10 facts about the Emerald Nightmare. Number 10. For the longest time, the origins of the Emerald Nightmare has been shrouded in mystery. Some speculation has also raised the possibility that perhaps Hakar, the god worshipped by the trolls, was the creator of the Emerald Nightmare, or had at least somehow played a part in growing its corruption. An example of this is how it is implied in-game that the consort to Ysera, Irenicus, fell victim to the Emerald Nightmare through the corruption of Hakar. It is also stated by Itharius, Irenicus' brother, that the Yatalai priests at the Sunken Temple use Hakar's blood to make green dragons fall under the corruption of the Nightmare. This has not been further touched up upon by Blizzard though, and is proven false in Chronicle, or at least a part of where it speculates that Hakar created the Emerald Nightmare. In Chronicle, it states that the 4 gateways to the Emerald Dream in Azeroth, one in Duskwood, another in the Hinterlands, another in Feralis, and the last one in Ashenvale, are used by Yogg-Saron to act as a doorway into the dream so that the old gods can begin corrupting it, giving birth to the Nightmare. So in Chronicle, it basically confirms that the old gods created the Nightmare, but it still may be possible that Hakar the Blood God is linked to the Nightmare as well. Number 9. For a good time, Malfurion Stormrage was trapped within the Emerald Dream without being able to wake up and return to his body. In time, the Night Elves discovered that it was actually someone that attacked Malfurion within his dream state, rendering him incapable of returning to his physical form. It is later revealed that Xavius was the one who was responsible for Malfurion's absence, and while placed in his captivity, Malfurion was constantly being mocked and tortured brutally by the former Highborn, transformed into a tree like he had done to Xavius in the past. Immobilized and unable to escape by himself, Malfurion then begins to form nightmares and sow them into the dreams of a young orc named Thura. This nightmare that Malfurion conjured showed her visions of her uncle Broxigar battling alongside the Kaldorei forces 10,000 years ago during the War of the Ancients. However, amidst the fighting, a druid betrays Broxigar and plants a seed on the back of Broxigar's neck, which quickly grows and engulfs the orc in thorns, impaling him and mutilating the orc warrior to the point of where he could do nothing but spasm and wait to bleed out. The face of the traitor druid is Malfurion. However, the reason why the Archdruid did this was because he wanted to lure the orc to him so that she could free him. Thura was now in possession of the axe of Cenarius, the legendary weapon of Broxigar himself. Malfurion knew that this axe was the only weapon capable of piercing the tree form that consumed his body, and he also knew that nothing better would drive an orc to him than a blood oath. He knew that when Thura reached him, she would think that striking the axe against the bark that imprisoned him would kill him, but in truth, it would free him. Number 8. Fandral Staghelm was once one of the most revered leaders of the Night Elven people, until the War of the Shifting Sands, where the Archdruid suffered a major loss. In the middle of the war, the Karaji general Rajak separated Valston, Fandral's own son, in half right before his father's own eyes. Since then, the Archdruid has lived his life in grief, saddened by the death of his only son. When the Emerald Nightmare was on the rise directly following the fall of the Lich King, but before the events of Deathwing's Cataclysm, Xavius discovered this and joyfully used the Archdruid's own weakness against him. He sent one of his nightmare manifestations disguised as a vision of Valston Staghelm to trick Fandral into believing that all of the other Night Elves were traitors and that the only way to deliver them into salvation was to plant a branch from Xavius' tree form into Teldrassil. While Fandral did this, believing that this was truly his son and that he truly would deliver his people into salvation, the ultimate truth was that Xavius wanted to corrupt the World Tree so that Azeroth and the Emerald Nightmare would be merged into one plane so that the manifestations of the Nightmare would be given physical forms in Azeroth. Number 7. One of the most prominent signs that an individual is near the presence of the nightmare is a thick, choking mist that seeks to consume all in its path. In the novel Stormrage, we get a good handful of information regarding the mist. Inside the ethereal realm of the dream itself, the mist is more active because it is where the nightmare is at its strongest. Through the mist, untold horrors are given birth from an individual's fears, meaning that the nightmare attacks each individual differently. It seeks out what you fear most and then turns it against you. It seeks out what you love most and uses it as a weapon. Also, it is implied in the book that usually once an individual encounters the mist, they instantly fall victim to the nightmare and become a sleeper, one who is unable to wake up and who is constantly plagued by horror-filled nightmares. An example of this is when the power of the nightmare grew so much to where it could manifest on Azeroth. Thunderbluff came under siege by the nightmare itself, and so Bane sent his scouts down the elevator to scout out the perimeter only to have them go missing. Another example is when the presence of the nightmare befell Stormwind, and as Varian called his troops to retreat back, each squadron of Stormwind soldiers blew a horn signaling an all-out retreat. The group nearest to the mist, however, blew their horn only to have it cut off midway, and the entire group consumed by the mist. Number 6. Fandrel's madness had not been discovered by the Night Elven people until it was almost too late. Trusted by his fellow druids and friends, he persuaded them that the only way that they could purify Teldrassil of its corruption was by channeling a ritual together which would heal Teldrassil and return it to its former glory. What the ritual actually did, however, was increase the corruption within the World Tree, bringing Azeroth ever closer to melding with the realm of the Nightmare. As the corruption increased, Azeroth entirely began to fall victim to the Nightmare, the mist consuming the lands and even making its way to the walls of both Stormwind and Orgrimmar. Eventually, the wall between both realms deteriorated so much to the point of where shadow manifestations from the nightmare were able to physically kill people, and also to where the sleepers not only continued to slumber in their beds suffering from nightmares, but to where they also began to sleepwalk, attacking former friends and loved ones, believing to be whatever it was that they are dreaming about. For example, a man might kill his brother and son because in his dream, he saw them as two Naga trying to kill him. Number 5. Auberdine was one of the first places in the world to have fallen to the corruption of the nightmare. When Brol Baremantle and Tyrande went to the settlement to investigate, they were greeted with nothing but a choking mist that for some reason did not affect them. Yet. However, it did affect everyone else in the town. Every single inhabitant was in a deep sleep, unable to be woken up by the two. As the pair began to explore the town further, the bodies of the sleepers began to moan. Then some of them began to scream. The mist suddenly felt heavier and much thicker. Tyrande and Brol then saw numerous haunting figures shrouded in the mist coming for them. It was the figures of the sleeping residents of Auberdine. However, their flesh was decayed, their eyes were completely white, and their faces twisted in so much pain that it was pretty clear that even death had not granted them relief. At that instant, an overwhelming desire to cower or curl up into a ball and lay down their weapons afflicted them. Even Tyrande, safeguarded by the blessing of Elune, almost dropped her weapon out of such overwhelming fear. But as both of them were about to be ripped apart, a human by the name of Lucan Foxblood came to their aid and teleported them out of Auberdine. If Lucan had not been there at that time, Tyrande and Brol would have fallen to the nightmare. Number 4. One of the most terrifying powers the nightmare has at its disposal that makes it almost impossible to defeat is its ability to hear an individual's thoughts. An example of this is when Brol and Tyrande enter the nightmare in order to rescue Malfurion, which causes Malfurion to try and hide that knowledge from Xavius by burying it deep beneath many of his other thoughts. Even when Xavius is not present, the nightmare itself can prey upon your mind, causing your thoughts to betray you. When Tyrande was trying to make her way through the nightmare to find Malfurion, she prayed to Elune to grant her a blessing to steal her will. However, at the end of the prayer, a whisper from the nightmare echoed, "Will. Will." The priestess then thought and asked herself, was there truly nothing safe? The nightmare then responded by echoing, "Nothing safe. Nothing safe." Number 3. Stormwind was the first capital city to fall under attack from the Emerald Nightmare. As the mists from the nightmare drew upon the walls of Stormwind, King Varian and what remained of his guards that still remained awake to safeguard the city stood in utter shock and horror as they began to see an army of decayed flesh figures walking in the mist. From the mist, Varian recognized two figures, one as his son Anduin, who was one of Stormwind's sleepers, and another of his wife Tiffin, who has been dead for a long time. Then Varian noticed something which brought him back to a sense of reality. The entire army in the mist were undead copies of both his wife and Anduin. It was a trick. There is no way that it could be real. Not yet. Varian then shouted to his soldiers that it was an illusion feasting off of each of their fears, and they took heart in the confidence of their king's words. Stormwind was among one of the first cities to come under attack from the nightmare, but through Varian's leadership, it was also one of the last that was still able to fend off the nightmare. Number 2. One of the only forces in Azeroth that is able to repel the malevolent evil of the nightmare effectively is Elune. Numerous times while trapped in the nightmare, Tyrande faces many near-death experiences, but through calling upon Elune, she is able to battle back the darkness. At one point, she even begins to hallucinate Queen Azshara and the Naga surrounding her within the Emerald Nightmare. Queen Azshara's tail wraps around Tyrande's neck, immobilizing her, and as she is about to suffocate, Tyrande calls upon a blessing from Elune, which instantly disintegrates the vision of Azshara and all of the Naga, but also knocking Tyrande out. When she gains consciousness though, she discovered that both of her hands were wrapped around her neck, tightly. The nightmare so powerful and so devious that it had managed to trick the High Priestess into almost strangling herself. Number 1. The nightmare attacked everyone, everywhere, even the Forsaken who do not dream as stated by Sylvanas fell victim to it. The Banshee Queen herself fell to the nightmare and was forced to experience a dream where she and the Dreadlord Vadimathras were the only two left in the Undercity who were not sleepers. However, we know that this is a dream because during this time after Wrath of the Lich King, Vadimathras is already dead. However, the nightmare twists and plays off of emotions to the extent of where even Sylvanas could not see that she had fallen to the nightmare. In the dream, Vadimathras brings her back to life, but suddenly, the minute she is stripped of her undead form and given life, he betrays her and orders a group of Forsaken guards to subdue her. After she is bound, he tells her, they may be a bit jealous of your new form, but really, they shouldn't be. You won't remain like that for long. A fear that gripped Sylvanas finally made her utter the words, "It won't last?" Another voice that did not belong to Vadimathras came from behind her. "It would last, if we gave you the chance." The Lich King now stood in her own courtroom, and even though Sylvanas knew that he had been defeated, the shock of everything happening at once clouded her judgment, making her question the principles between dream and reality. Arthas then said, "This time, I'll make you right. This time, you will be an obedient servant, even if we have to raise you again and again to get it right." Now this is pretty terrible because when Arthas transformed Sylvanas into a Banshee during the assault on Quel'Thalas, she states that the pain that she endured during the transformation was unlike a pain ever endured before. The most horrible physical pain possible paled in comparison to the torment that she was forced to go through. And in the nightmare, not only is the butcher of her people brought back to life, but like before, she is forced to transform into a Banshee, but this time, over and over again until finally, Malfurion Stormrage was able to defeat Xavius, putting a temporary end to the nightmare.